Hello and welcome to CounterPick New Perspectives, the podcast where we take topics from just around various discussions that we get inspired by, and mostly centered around gaming and entertainment, and we try to take a more varied and nuanced approach. So, of course, I got a notification sound. Whatever.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I know. It's fine. So yeah, my name is Samuel Ray, also known as Dr. Sam, and with me is my co-host,
Professor Prime.
All right, and so today's topic was something that I've seen discussed in the fighting game community a while back, and just in general, a lot of topics we kind of talk about here tend to come from more, I guess you could say, insular niches. But I wanted to talk about today was the dichotomy between your game design, tight design, and loose design. I first heard about this topic in a Maximilian Dude video. Shout out, he knows how to make some pretty good fighting game content that appeals to people beyond just the hardcore, already initiated.
Yeah.
But he was talking about design in fighting games, but this can obviously apply to everything because nothing exists in a vacuum. And so the topic was about how tight design and loose design. Tight design was more equated to fine-tuned and somewhat restricted, like much more heavily regulated design, and loose design is where more off-the-wall crazy things can happen, or it's a little more free-form, right? A little more unrestricted. And a recent game that just released was Gundam Breaker 4, and both Sai and I played in the playtest for that. Real quick, right off the gates, what was your just simple thoughts on that playtest?
Oh, it was fun. It was great. I liked figuring out how to, combo in different ways. I could have spent so much time on the color customization, the customization of the gunpla, but I was streaming, so I tried to keep that to a minimum.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's simple fun.
And that's exactly what I was thinking about when it came to this, because when I was playing, there was a moment where I started using the cracker grenade to extend combos. So like in the middle of a juggle, I was starting to excuse me, sorry, got a frog in my throat for a quick sec. But yeah, I was
oh no, did the toad that I escorted out come back?
Oh yeah, that toad that was in your room for no reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so essentially what happened was once I hit that moment of doing a launcher, jumping, and then doing an air follow-up, and then using a grenade to extend the combo and kind of reset the combo, and then do a different combo tree or different skills, right? Chaining one skill into the grenade, into more combo, into another skill, and I started just realizing, like, oh, this combo system is actually quite freeform, quite flexible. And so then I started putting together all sorts of awesome combos with varying skills that come from the different parts that you can customize with. And it really gave me that character action game feel. Games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, I guess to an extent Vanquish, Astral Chain, and the like. Transformers Devastation. Call out to the niche one from Platinum Games.
Yeah.
But like, it really felt really freeform and flexible, like I said, and that reminded me of loose game design, right? Because the ability to dash cancel actions, so you don't have to commit too hard to actions as long as you have dash meter. You have the ability to cancel regular actions into skills. You have the ability to chain skills into other skills. Like, it just is loose, right? It's very loose, very freeform, very flexible, and you have a lot of freedom to do things. And that combined with the snappy and responsiveness of the gameplay inputs happening on screen, it just made it feel very, very fun, very rewarding, right?
Right, yeah.
And so that just immediately made me think of the whole loose versus tight game design, because before that, when Gundam Breaker 4 was announced, I went back and played the previous entry, and the only one released in English here in America, New Gundam Breaker. Horrible name, by
Right.
the way, but they
Yeah,
clearly
like New
wanted
Super
to.
Mario Bros.
Yeah, they clearly wanted to overrule that and say this is not Gundam Breaker 4. This is the real Gundam Breaker 4, when the one they just released. But in New Gundam Breaker, they simplified things and they made it a lot more restrictive. You couldn't even dash cancel your actions. So like I found myself, if I was pressing normal attacks and swinging at air, like missing, you had to either just had to stop your combo, wait for the animation to complete, and then you could reposition and move. And it just felt so clunky. And like there was just, they made less cancelable things. And it just, everything felt slower and more sluggish, more clunky, less free, you know? And that was an example in the comparison to Gundam Breaker 4 of like overly tight design, right? I think they were trying to, in efforts of trying to make it approachable for a global audience, since it was the first entry they released in more languages than just Japanese, like not more languages, but more regions right out the gates. Yeah, no, it just didn't feel good, right? And
Right. I haven't played. Was that the one on the PS Vita?
no, PS Vita had Gundam Breaker 1 through 3. So those
there
played
was-
more like
There was one that we played on the PS Vita, but
That was the
like,
first one.
The cartridge messed with our battery indicators.
yeah, that was Gundam Breaker 1.
It's
That was the
weird.
very first one.
Okay, yeah, that's the last one that I played before
Yeah,
this. So.
yeah. So New Gundam Breaker here in America was only released on PC. I only bought it
Right.
to just support the cause of getting new Gundam games in America, as there was such a drought of Gundam games
Right.
released here in America after the PS2 and PS3 days.
Yeah.
So
It kind of sucks though when companies are like, "Oh, if you want more of these games, then you gotta buy the games that we give," and then they
suck.
put out like a bad game. It's like, well, what are we supposed to
well,
do?
they put
Tell
out a
you that
bad
we
one,
want,
then they put
tell
out,
you that we want bad games.
and then they did
but,
SD Gundam games, right? And it's just like, I don't want the SD
Yeah,
Gundam
like
games.
that's not demographic. It's a little bit of a different demographic, but I digress.
Yeah, so it's just the difference though between New Gundam Breaker and Gundam Breaker 4 was night and day, and it was just a stark difference and a very big, like, obvious, you know, example of tight and loose design. Now usually it's like referred to, at the very least the first time I heard this talk about it was talking about fighting games, which are PvP, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that the pros and cons of tight and loose design change drastically when you go from single player or co-op versus, you know, player versus environment co-op, right?
Well,
Which is
yeah,
what Gundam Breaker
because-
4 is, to
Yeah, I mean,
player versus player.
We've talked about it plenty of times before, but you know, cliff notes. What's fair to the other person doesn't matter when there's not another person. So you know, PVE, you don't necessarily have to balance things as much, and you can just give your player crazy stuff to just do.
And that's a situation where loose design is absolutely ideal.
Yeah.
Like if you think about character action games like DMC and Bayonetta, what do people love about them? It's how smooth and fluid and freeform it feels. Same with, you know, the Gundam Breaker 4, when you have the freedom to show your skill through all your actions, right? The way you chain actions together. Heck, when I streamed Gundam Breaker 4, you know, on Saturday, I literally had a moment right out the gates before I even had any of the good parts, where I was attacking a mobile suit that had, like, you know, super armor, and then as soon as it attacked me, I like dodged to the side and counterattacked it and finished it off. And I just did that on instinct because I was able to dash cancel my attack actions.
Now
That
I
one
do
element
think
of loose design, right? The ability
Yeah.
to dash cancel gave me the freedom to dodge on instinct, and it felt
now
good.
I do think there's a bit of like, even when you have something like, you know, you're going Devil May Cry mode, right, and being
Mhm.
like, okay, they need to just have all these kind of things that they can do. There still needs to be some level of structure, right?
Absolutely.
For freedom to matter, there has to be a little bit of structure, you know, and
Yes.
otherwise, like, if the whole experience is like beyond loose, it's mushy, then none of it has any, well, solidity, right? So
Yeah.
So yeah, if just anything could cancel into anything and everything did like crazy damage, and like there was like your hitboxes are way too big, it's like, well, you're not doing any work then. I mean, not okay. Work is a wrong word. You're not showing any skill then.
Yeah.
Yeah. If everything just works without having to like actually.
Yeah, if everything works too easily, like you can chain everything into everything and cancel everything out of everything. Then
it's like
yeah,
like a Dynasty Warriors or a Marvel Ultimate Alliance, you know. That's made to be very easy.
Yeah,
because everything is the same. Like most of the characters have all the same like kind of combos or whatever. You know, it's. But you get tired of it after a while. I mean, not every player, because I guess some gamers like don't necessarily care as much about being rewarded for ingenuity or skill or whatever word you want to use. Some players do just like being rewarded, and they don't care necessarily how much they have to do to get it.
Yeah, they just want the reward and not to earn it.
Yeah, but and like in those cases, like a Dynasty Warriors works fine. I'm not throwing any shade. It's just not for me.
Yeah, see, that's the thing though. Dynasty Warriors, I would call it, actually, from the ones I played anyway, which were earlier entries, they weren't very freeform. You know, they just had very distinct branching, you know, attack trees. So you press, you know, light attack a certain amount of times, then heavy a time or two, or however many times to finish the combo.
I mean, yeah, but you can kind of just press the buttons in whatever order, and then and stuff will happen, and people will go flying.
Yeah, but there was, from what I recalled, and I don't know, maybe they added this later on, it was things like, you know, dash cancels or action cancels to add a little more depth. But yeah, it was just, I mean, Gunbreaker 4 isn't too unlike Dynasty Warriors in a way. It is one versus many. It's just not like hordes, like armies.
But like a lot of the time, if you just keep mashing at one enemy, then something's gonna shoot you from the side, and you're like, stop it.
And the same was in Dynasty Warriors when they introduced archers and stuff into the later, or you know, when you get past the first couple of levels.
Okay, well, if you say so. I mean, also, I'm mainly remembering Dynasty Warriors like Gundam. What was it, 3, 4?
Yeah, and mostly the early levels.
I guess so. It's been a while. It's been over a decade.
The difference is it feels less like a character action game than Gunbreaker 4 does. Gunbreaker 4 allows much more flexibility in like aerial combos. That's the big difference. Dynasty Warriors is very grounded.
So
less dimensions to it.
So what exactly do you mean though by like I've got kind of a sense of what you mean, but like what specifically is like tight gameplay design and loose gameplay design? Are we specifically talking about like
well, we can
real time action games here?
Yeah, so we can talk about like, for example, in a real time PvP action game like fighting games or MOBAs, right? So let's start with fighting games because we both know that a bit more than MOBAs, and well, a lot more actually. We played many more fighting games than MOBAs. Yeah, so in fighting games, loose design is Marvel vs. Capcom, right? Where you know, you're wave dashing around back and forth, your flight, you're doing the flight, you know, 8-way flight, you're doing flight reflight type stuff, you're flight cancel refly, you're doing these really long combos with assist extensions or touch of deaths. You know, you get hit once you die.
Okay, see, like the thing is
the freeness, right? The openness of that design, the looseness of that design is what allows stuff like that to happen.
Okay, the thing is, I'm not sure you can necessarily call that loose design, because a lot of that was sort of broken by the players, right?
To an extent, yeah.
You know, the wave dashing, blink dashing, a lot of this like fly combos, right? That wasn't necessarily intended, and players pushed it further. Like if I don't think the developers or the playtesters, whatever, were playing like that while the game was being made, right?
Yeah, same with like Melee, right?
Melee, yeah. So, and there are plenty of characters in Marvel 3 that lag behind and don't have like the certain benefits, like as far as I know, like something that I saw actually recently in a video I was watching about it. Ryu cannot do the standard wave dash very well because of the power of nothingness super, which is a down input, along with the two buttons that you use for the dash.
Right. So if you accidentally press down twice during in between steps, you end up doing a super.
But like a lot of those like down forwards are going to be buffered, so it's probably going to end up being a down. Then he had to like plink dashing got discovered, but with Ryu specifically, you have to do it like a certain way. You have to be particularly like precise with it, and so some characters, right, don't benefit as much from certain innovations in the game, right, and then lag behind. So I think the innovation that happened throughout those years of MVC3 play, right, it seems very free when you're looking from the outside in and don't necessarily know all of the like cold fusion that goes into being able to do all these things, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And so then let me ask you this then. For loose gameplay, right, rather than tight gameplay, would you consider an element that goes into play of how the players kind of break things and figure out how to exploit, aspects of the game engine, which is what most things like repeated wave dashes and what was it in Marvel 3, team aerial combo supers or infinites, TAC infinites, stuff like that. And in general, just infinite combos or touch of death combos that aren't like intentionally designed. So would you consider like, I guess game engine like specificities or design oversights that result in such things? Would you consider that a part of loose gameplay, like I guess design? Because I feel like it might be if you think about it as an aspect of something that may be missing from their design, or something that they overlooked, or something they may have discovered and left in, like with melee wave dashing. It was a design choice, this way, right? It was an aspect of design.
I mean, that's what I was going to. We think too similar sometimes. Because what I was going to say was, I think what goes toward what you are calling loose gameplay design is a lack of defined limitations, right? And so those limits will always get pushed by the players who want to do more, but you can't push the limits in like if you tried to do that in, say, one of our classic super extreme examples of a fighting game, right, Fantasy Strike. There are such defined limits in that game engine that you cannot push it. It's done.
Well, yeah, it's kind of all limits. And that's what people call it results in a solved game, right? Because there's nothing to break free of. There's no way to break free of certain limitations. So once you figure out the optimal choice in the situation, there is no two ways about it. That is the only thing you should do in that situation.
Yeah, and I would almost argue that like either besides jump kick, or maybe even more than jump kick, Fantasy Strike may be like a solved.
You mean dive kick?
Game in the dive kick? Yeah, sorry.
I just dropped my contrender.
Like,
sorry.
I feel like dive kick, paradoxically, even though there's
less things to do,
even less options per character, I feel like it may be actually less solved than than like Fantasy Strike, right? But I'm just going off
because of how like your jump height and your angle, so that determines the different angles of attack.
Because of how in Fantasy Strike, due to like the more pronounced traits that characters have, as opposed to dive kick being very simple, just kind of like in how they jump and how they kick or attack. I don't think they're all kicks. That
they're all variants of dive kicks.
There aren't going to be as many like crazy, 80-20 or 70-30 like matchups as happens in Fantasy Strike, right? But I digress. That's left field. So what are we talking about?
So would you say that a lack of something or a lack of an aspect of design is a part of loose or tight design?
Yeah, and I think it goes into, the fact that just fighting games were crazier back in the day because they didn't know what limits to make or, how to stop players from doing certain things because they didn't even know what would be done yet. Right.
Yeah.
But like you get to, modern day with Street Fighter 6, I don't think players are really breaking the game necessarily.
Right. Yeah. Players aren't breaking the game. They're just finding what's strongest in the game, drive rush. Right. And then it becomes like a centralized part of how the game is played.
Yeah. But then you travel back in time to time warp. Time warped, and go back to Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, and you've got like Genajin making the after image strikes, and you're like, okay, all right, how do we combo with this then? We have more hits, so we can throw in like the strongest attacks, get that kick, palm, jump, whatever, all that
those juggles,
but look at a move that looks similar in a modern game, right? With Grand Blue Fantasy versus Rising and Seox's after image special, after image super.
Yeah.
But the problem is with the combo limit system, that super is a hindrance. You use up all your hits.
Right.
So nobody even does that super.
Right.
It's a limitation that results in tighter design, right?
Yeah, like what you said, that reminds me of Blade Strangers. Remember how that thing was designed, how you could only use a single move once in a combo, and as soon as you hit a repeat move, then the opponent automatically falls out, becomes invincible and falls out of your combo, and then it forces into the wake up game, right?
Yeah.
So
that system is a little less tight than like Grand Blue's.
Because you can figure out, because it kind of gives you a structure to figure out how to structure your combos, right? And then how you structure your combo differs depending on what move hit first, right?
Yeah, because in Blade Strangers, it's more like, okay, let's figure out how to fit as many of these in here as we can, as opposed to Grand Blue is like, well, you just want to try to get as many hits as you can while your opponent has their feet planted on the ground, and then like once they're in the air, like different moves kind of have different values for the combo limit, but generally it's around the same kind of amount of hits until they get the flip out.
Right, and so then you want to, before you hit that point, just go for a hard knockdown.
Yeah, it's more about condensing the combo as opposed to figuring out how to get as many of the ingredients in there as you can without
and the thing
repeating.
And then so what I'm kind of where I lean towards this, I feel like in player versus player, tighter design is actually better. It creates a better, more interplay, more interactions per match, per minute played, and more opportunities for counterplay, which for me is the interesting part of the whole point of PvP, really, is not to just subjugate another person to, as some say, cutscenes, right? But to have interactions. And so, like, remember a good example, Skullgirls, right? It has a combo,
Yeah.
an infinite prevention, where if you use the same move too many times, the combo is forced to end, similar to Blade Strangers.
Yeah.
So what players figured out to do is to do resets, parts where you strategically end the combo early to then force the opponent to have to guess what you're going to do next, a mix-up, so that you can then start the combo anew and get even more damage than you would have if you could do a longer combo.
Yeah, I mean the thing is you can do resets in like a lot of different fighting games, but
in a way
issue
that's
is
where limitation forces more creativity from the aggressor.
the issue though is how much reward do you get from a reset or how much potential reward do you have from getting a reset as opposed to going for a knockdown and then going for offense on the knockdown, right? And so I mean, for a while there was a certain kind of reset in Dragon Ball Fighters, right, with the snapback meta. Now that
which there was two characters that did snapbacks, and that was Piccolo and Gotenks were the best at that, right?
Well, that kind of blurs the line though between resets and like wake up pressure.
True.
Because it's also very similar to incoming mix in Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Yeah, but the problem with Marvel vs. Capcom is since there was no way to change up your incoming timing, it just became a guaranteed, like, it's more like Oki. It just became a guaranteed
Sam, there wasn't in Dragon Ball Fighters either. They had to add it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like most games nowadays, also have varied wake-up timings after hard knockdowns, right? Where you can do a fast, not hard knockdowns, but soft knockdowns, where you can do a fast rise or a normal rise.
Yeah.
So, like, but every aspect of that does add some depth, but you have to. I don't know. I feel like
okay, but here's what I was gonna say, because what was it that you said about, like, you know, about your reasoning for tight gameplay design being better for
I think it just it forces more creativity on the part of the aggressor, and it also forces there to be more interactions per minute played.
Okay, so
and for me, for PvP, that is where the value comes from, is player interaction per time played.
I'm gonna lean back in my chair here, and I am going to fill my role here on the podcast, right? I guess you could call it devil's advocate, or just you know, the contrary opinion, or just laying things out, right?
Yeah.
So obviously I see where you're coming from, right? You need to have more interactions, more chances to show your skill and decide who is the better player, right? Now here's the other side. When speaking especially about games like MVC3, right? Marvel vs. Capcom 3. There is a kind of mindset that comes to my mind similar to something like the Olympics, right? This is kind of, is this still topical? I'm not sure if it is, but it's the example that came to my mind.
Okay.
You know, what is the Olympics about? Well, for one, it's like you know, understanding culture, togetherness,
well,
you
it's
know,
about
social,
the best of the best,
whatever.
from every...
It's about the best of the best, pushing human, like physical human excellence, right?
Yeah.
Being able to see how far humanity can push. Now, obviously, video games aren't that as grand as that, whatever. But my point is the mindset of, like, you could see Marvel vs. Capcom 3, things like that, as like individualist kind of pushing things as far as you can. And when a game is more limited in what you could do, there isn't that as much of that draw of how far can I push to the heights, right? When you're climbing a smaller mountain. Now, that's not necessarily as much about the competition as it is about individual accomplishment. It makes it a little more messy with the fact that it's involved in a person versus person competition, when most competitions in the Olympics, for example, are ones where the athletes aren't actually directly interacting with each other. There are some, but not many.
Okay, so that reminds me, this might just be a tangent, but I heard that apparently this year in the Olympics for fencing, there was a guy who won he found a new strat. They refer to it as a bunny hop strat. Because fencing's like the closest thing to a side-scrolling, fighting game.
Yeah, you can't move left to right. You have to stay on the line.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so this guy, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to introduce up and down movement. It would be draining if you have to have the physicality to do it without tiring yourself out. But it was throwing off people's precision because the spots you have to strike for were moving up and down.
Oh no, he legit was doing the shooter bunny hop.
And then after he did that this year, they had to modify the rules to ban that. because it became too powerful. Repeated jumping. They had to ban specifically repeated jumping. Like if you hop back, right, to try and create space fast, that's okay. But if you're repeatedly hopping back and forth, they're like, no more of that, because it became such a dominant strategy.
I mean, yeah, it would become kind of a circus if everyone's just hopping at each other.
Yeah. Although I think I heard about this on, I think it was Trash Taste podcast highlights, and so and they were saying though it was crazy. It was actually really entertaining to watch. But yeah, and I feel like to an extent I get what you mean. You need some looseness so that people can innovate, right, and be creative. But if you have absolute looseness, then you have no structure, and it's hard to really determine what's skill and what's cheese, right?
Yeah, but the people's threshold for what's absolute looseness is going to be different.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly a fan of playing Marvel vs. Capcom, right? Competitively or whatever. We had our plenty of fun back in the day playing against each other. And at a certain point, after seeing some competitive stuff, we played against each other with a bit more skill, but and learning some combos and stuff, but never got to crazy levels.
Yeah.
Right. I was watching some Lethero, for example, right, and started playing his Joe, Phoenix, and what, Dante team. Yeah, trying to get the Phoenix. I meant Phoenix, right? There's two Phoenixes in the game.
True. Yeah, you have to specify the exact thing.
Trying to get the Phoenix right stuff, and the Ace Attorney super and all that. But yeah, I'm not a fan though of oh man, Guilty Gear. Yeah, because sometimes, yeah, I'm done with the devil's advocate.
Too many moving parts in that one.
I'm done with the devil's advocate because I'm agreeing with you on this. It was agonizing playing. I joined a certain tournament. I'm not going to name names.
Yeah.
And I played against. And my lord, my tournament luck is if I believed in luck, it's the worst.
Yeah.
I just end up either getting buys and going into the tournament later rounds in the tournament unprepared, or I get matched up against the best player in the daggone bracket, and I got matched up against the best player in that daggone bracket who was a high level, possibly the highest level, Happy Chaos player.
Right.
And when you push Happy Chaos to his limits, that just means you don't get to play. Now, granted, I have not played Guilty Gear Strive in
years. At least
years, multiple years. But I was expecting to at least get to do something. I wasn't expecting to win, but at least one combo. No. no. So yeah, that
In that kind of situation, you
push
would have preferred if Happy Gas was a bit
to
more
the
restricted.
uh,
That way, he would have had to play more Guilty Gear instead of make a
I
opponent
just
play
wanted
less.
to do a dumb,
Yeah.
fun, stupid combo where I like fly across the screen doing air lights.
Right.
I just wanted to get that once, but you know, I only joined the tournament because it was for like a cause or whatever. But in any case,
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Crazy.
some people enjoy the, you know, fixating on a certain thing and then like pushing it to its maximum. Yeah.
Yeah, and I get the, because like I think that comes from, see, the problem is taking that mindset, which I feel suits more. What?
Sorry, I'm gonna cut you off here, but what I was gonna say, because it just came to my mind too, because yeah, I listen to videos, podcasts, whatever. Someone was saying at some point, because people are working on like crazy technology, you know, like designer babies, you know, like people, you know, being able to program people as they're born, right, to have certain attributes, and that wouldn't necessarily be like performance enhancing drugs, right? Because I've mentioned to you something I learned before in a like one of those podcasts talking about it. For example, Michael Phelps, you know, famous swimmer.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows him, even if you aren't into like yeah, athletics, the Olympics,
You've heard the
sports,
name.
whatever. You've heard the name. Yeah, he's like the most famous swimmer ever, and he just happened to be born like it and develop in a way that like he's an optimized human for swimming.
Yeah, he's
Like
just
a longer torso,
a genetic abnormality
partially
that makes-
webbed toes,
Yeah.
long wingspan, like shorter legs, or no, not shorter legs, but like long torso, partially webbed toes. Yeah, all that. And so, I mean, he just happened to be that way. But like, if designer babies start being more prevalent, right, and being able to basically make your child like, I have money, I want my child to be optimized for swimming, and get them like basically genetically programmed to come out that way. That's not necessarily performance enhancing drugs, but it would dominate the
children of those with the money to make sure that they have the genetic traits that give them an advantage. It creates more
the
privilege.
thing is, though,
leads to
the Olympics already is and like competitive sports are generally dominated by people who have started in that sport very young and dedicated themselves to it for their whole lives, right?
Yeah.
So it's still kind of the same thing, but it would just be dominated by that in addition to money, affluence. And then people have said, okay, well, at one point, are we just going to have like a performance enhancing drugs sports league where like all of that is allowed as well, and just see how much even further you could get? But that's like ridiculousness. But yeah, that would be kind of, I guess, a way to keep that out of the non-drug league. But I don't think they're ever going to do that. Just some people say some stuff on the internet like, we should do this. Probably not. Because still, even if people were willing to subject themselves to whatever like other effects from it, probably don't want to encourage it. But my roundabout point was some of these more like crazy pushed further kind of nutso games, right? Get to the like, it's kind of the equivalent of like designer baby Olympics, right? Where it's like, okay, it's dominated by the people who spent like the most time on this and learned all of these, like, you know, made these optimizations that were not intended for the game, right? Both are not intended. I don't know if I made a very good point there, but you know, maybe people learned something. In any case,
because what you're taking is the, because you know, in the world of athletic sports,
Yes.
biology can give an advantage. That's why we have
Yes.
all sorts of classifications to keep things fair and to prevent people from getting injured, right? Weight classes in combat sports, and in things like lifting, because literally the amount of muscle does determine how much you can lift. Height
There's
in
even
basketball,
things like testosterone amounts. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, testosterone literally it is responsible for the development of muscle, right?
Yeah.
And every human has testosterone. You know,
Yeah.
certain people just have more.
Yeah.
And things as well as like how well your blood carries oxygen throughout your body.
That's true.
It's different for people because every little biological thing in a person's body is slightly different from everyone else's.
Yeah, solid point there. Lung capacity, right?
Yeah.
Height in things like basketball, and you know, I guess you could say muscle density, or
Also height in the opposite direction in things like gymnastics.
or
horse riding.
F1, or you know, vehicle racing in general.
Yes.
The smaller and lighter you are, the better. You know, the faster your car can go. If the car is exactly equal, right?
Yeah.
If every
I don't
car is
know
exactly identical, then
I don't think any of this is related to the
Yeah.
topic, because I mean that sort of is analogous to just a different thing entirely in player versus player games, like
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
reaction speed, you know, dexterity, finger dexterity, hand dexterity.
yeah, we kind of did
different
go off
people
on a
also-
tangent, didn't we?
Yeah.
Big time. Because how did we even get here? Holy smokes.
I made a comparison to the Olympics.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because with athletic sports, there's that element of the human physicality, and so the wanting to push yourself to the limit of physical ability and skill, right, is a natural part of that kind of competition. But with games, I feel like that, you know, obviously with competition comes a similar mindset, but at the same time,
different kinds of games push different kinds of limits.
exactly. And I feel like, though, if you don't have any limits, then how can you push any limits? So like, if you have you don't have
there are
enough
limits.
structure. Well, yeah, games by themselves inherently have the limits, and those limits are the programming, right, and your input method, controllers, keyboard, what have you.
Yeah, different people just are going to like or not like different kinds of setups there.
Yeah. So I do think, though, because like, let's look at what's one of the most popular competitive game genres in the world, the MOBA, right?
Right.
Now, I would say that MOBAs in general are a bit more tightly designed than, say, fighting games, right? Because think about it, how your characters are designed, right? Your character has a specific set of skills. Those skills do very specific things, and the skill comes less from pushing the limits of what that skill can do, but more about skillful use, so with timing, aiming, synergizing with other skills of yours or your teammates' abilities. Coordination, positioning. It's aspects other than just like, you know, pushing the game engine, right? Like in MOBAs, like the biggest example I can think of when players found an exploit for the game engine was the League of Legends Blitzcrank teleport, where a character could cause an ally to return to base, right? And so it was a save mechanic, essentially. It was like a supporter who's like, okay, you're in danger, I'm gonna send you back to base where you rapidly heal.
Yeah.
And then Blitzcrank would
there's
cook.
a similar thing with
I think the character was
in
Blitzcrank,
Pokemon Unite.
Yeah, but then the character that was being, so you would coordinate with timing, the one sending, I think the character's name was Blitzcrank, back to base, but right with perfect timing, if you could get in a small window, if you could hook an enemy player with one of Blitzcrank's skills, where he hooks and pulls them to him, he would pull him all the way back to base.
Yeah.
And if you got into an enemy's base before you destroyed all their defenses leading up to it, all the turrets just blow you up in a matter of seconds.
Okay.
And so it was a strat that was centralizing, because it was just, if you could figure out how to do that, it was just hook, return, they go you know, and one enemy flies all the way back to your base and get obliterated, decimated. And so you're essentially able to immediately remove one enemy out of play, and depending on how close you were to the enemy's base, it could take several seconds before that player arrives in the base. And by that point, the one who got returned, Blitzcrank I think it was, is already moving back towards, you know, running back towards the action. So you're literally, you know, you're removing an enemy from play for several seconds, and you lose nothing for it.
I mean, the thing is though, like,
and guess what the devs had to do? The devs had to patch that out, because that was a situation of breaking those limitations of the game. It was a bad thing for the competition and for the way the game was played. So, and historically, Riot would think they rebalance the game every several days, like every couple weeks or something like that. So they keep it pretty tightly designed, right? But people don't really get bored of it like fighting game players get bored of tightly designed fighting games.
That's because inherently fighting games are more individualistic than MOBAs, right? So the mindsets are going to line up more often of, like, you know, someone who prefers fighting games over MOBAs, right, is going to be more often the individualistic, like, how good can I get at this, right, and more likely to lean toward those things where one person can do crazier things.
Bounce off of a game that doesn't let them
do that. MOBAs are inherently more about the, you know, the structure, the timing, the teamwork, whatnot. So it's just like how even in team sports, there can sometimes be those, like, you know, there are star players in things like basketball and football. For all you non-American viewers, yes, I'm calling it football. I'm talking about American football. Whatever. Listen, the name came from the UK. The name soccer for football came from the UK. It's a whole thing. Look it up. So, you know, don't make fun of us for calling it soccer and American football. Anyway, star players, you know, are a thing in football and basketball and whatnot. Like, and that's a team sport. But you get, you know, your, like, Michael Jordan's, your LeBron James. You know, I'm struggling to think of any more, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Totally.
And like, and that's what brings a good number of people to things like that. Is not the, you know, not necessarily the intricate, oh, look at the team all working together, because that doesn't make as much of an impact as, yo, this guy is sick. You know?
Right.
And that's the same reason why, you know, offensive spectacle in fighting games is leaned into often more than the, you know, defensive skill or small invisible decisions, because guess what? They're invisible. Yeah,
and that's
why nobody's focusing as much on the, like, oh, this dude I don't know got the rebound and he passed it to this guy and, you know, the pick and all that. If one dude is like running down the entire court, juking everybody and going for a slam dunk, people who don't know any of the intricacies of basketball are gonna love that.
Yeah,
because it looks sick anyway.
That's true. And like, because like, yeah, if you take like boxing into account, offense sells tickets, defense wins, you know, matches, wins titles. People, you know, the offense is what more people are able to recognize, right? Skillful offense is more easily recognizable than skillful defense. And that's why people get bored of defensive fighters, but those are the ones who usually win, because defense is such a core, fundamental part of how, you know, of the fight, that if you skimp on your defense and go all offense, you're just going to tucker yourself out and lose, right? On points, if nothing else, or get counterpunched and get knocked the heck out. it's hard for them to make fighting games the same way is the problem, because in order to make the offense flashy and fun to watch, the defense usually has to suffer for that, because if defense is strong, then players aren't allowed to do the offense, the flashy offense, right? So it's unfortunately because of the fact that it's the limitations of it being a game rather than real life, you know, your only limitations are how you can move your own body, right? Then it's harder to create that balance where the defense is rewarding, but the offense is, you know, just as much as the offense is. It's usually swings heavily in one direction or the other, and the games where the defense is more rewarding than the offense, people feel they're stale and boring and slow and whatnot.
But for like comparison though, people push things in you know, real life sports too, right? Like football became, like, over its history, became more and more you know, like people would throw themselves into like tackles and run through things like more and more, and you know, there needed to be more like protection and whatnot. Like back, ironically, like back in the day, you know, with the classic like pigskin and not as many pads or whatever. Like you would think that people got hurt more with less protection, but I mean, I don't know any of the numbers. I can only say what I've heard of, but like the idea could be that people didn't throw themselves into things as hard because of lacking those protections, right? And once you have like better pads, better everything, right, you feel invincible, so you're like, all right, I'm flying into this, right? You know, let's go.
Well, it's kind of funny because in a lot of modern physical sports, I've seen people complaining about how they're actually becoming worse because of rules and regulations in some ways becoming too tight, where, like, for example, calling fouls on defensive plays, like in basketball. Back in the day, if someone was driving in for a dunk, someone would try to block them with their whole body, right? You can jump up there and get up with them and try to stop them. But now, if you do that, you might get a foul called on you, so people are more likely to just kind of move out of the way and let the person do the dunk. And it becomes more boring because it's less physicality, less defensive plays to try and, you know, wall out someone. And apparently same with football, where people going a little too hard physically on the defensive line, getting fouls called on them. So now it's like, well, now you're making it too easy for offense to run and score, right? For offense to run their plays and score.
And reminds me too of the common joke about like soccer players flopping onto the grass whenever someone like grazes them.
Oh, the same thing happens in basketball too. Some people criticize, I think it's LeBron for doing that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, it's like, especially basketball is like the prime example of this, where like calling fouls on defensive plays being too much and causing, because like the average scores in basketball games has gone up over the years as defense has been harder to do without getting called foul on it. And so they've been nerfing defense, and it's caused higher scoring games where both teams just get higher scores on average. And you know, I guess the spectators who don't really think about it too much, that's more entertaining, right? More points being scored equals more entertainment. But it also removes a lot of nuance in the game. And that's literally what I actually heard I saw someone talking about that in a video about fighting games and fighting games becoming too you know, offense oriented and too easy. And I'm just like, ow. So this is just a product of the modern mindsets rather than, you know, and modern attention span rather than just fighting games or whatever, right? It's just anytime defense is allowed to wall out offense, people get bored, especially spectators. But the problem is how this relates, I guess, coming back to loose and tight design. We've
kind of had a loose conversation about this.
Going to loose and tighter design, I feel like tighter design games tend to have more rewarding defense because of there being a bit more restrictions both on offense and defense. And so then when that happens, you know, you're able to decipher the proper defensive measure for an offensive action more easily.
Well, you can't really push limits on defense. Limits get pushed on offense.
Exactly. And so the more openness there is for the limits of your offensive actions and mix-ups and whatever, to the more there's
like I guess the only way you can push defense is movement ability. You know, being able to avoid things.
Yeah.
Not so much the blocking. Like blocking is just blocking. There's no real like.
Yeah, but then games like Tekken have been nerfing that movement. So it's like, you know, it's a catch-22. You know, looseness in certain areas, tightness in the wrong areas. It's like, I don't know. It's so weird because then you have games like MOBAs, right? And MOBAs, they are a much tighter design than fighting games, like you said, because they're not as individualistic. You still do have those star players, like you won't have people like Faker become the name he is if there wasn't an ability to become such a standout player.
Right.
But that is rarer because there's less room to break the game, right? To break the limits. Those are the people who become those names are the people who just push the limits as far as possible and reach the upper level to a greater extent and with more consistency than everyone else. But they don't necessarily break the limits. They just, you know, the limits aren't easy to get to, and those are the people who are operating at the limit all the time. They're always firing on all cylinders, right? And so it's like, holy crap, you know, if you have this guy on your team, you've got, you know, an edge. And it's not like he's doing something that absolutely no one else could ever do with enough practice or skill or talent, right? Because they're playing a video game. And I honestly feel like that's kind of how it's supposed to be, because it's a video game, right? It's not, you're not training your body. Heck, even the human body has limits, right? And that's why some people resort to things like they try to juice to break through the natural human limits of their body.
Yeah.
And what is that always considered? Cheating. Yet in video games, they don't do the same thing in a lot of competitive scenes. Now, that's the thing.
Well, I mean, because
in
you're
fighting
not
games,
like doing literal juicing.
well, yeah, and
You can't really.
there is like things like Adderall and whatnot, and those are considered cheating. Yeah. But like, just I find the dichotomy in preferences between loose and tight game design between different genres and scenes to be very interesting, because, you know, in the fighting game scene, they tend to hate tightness in the design. They prefer looseness. In MOBAs, when you have too much looseness, you have the, you know, the hook teleport back to base exploits, and those get swiftly patched out. And people praise it when it's patched out because of how centralizing and cheesy it is, right? So they see the breaking of limits as cheese, or at least they're more likely to.
Well, there are things that are more similar to things like the hook, right? So there are things like, for instance, the Meta Knight infinite cape.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah. In Brawl.
Right, where you're just
in Smash Brothers Brawl.
Can't get hurt.
Yeah.
Can't interact.
Now, you would have to do like a bunch of near frame perfect inputs to stay caped for the whole match, but you could potentially get the percentage lead, and then stay in the infinite cape glitch.
Yeah, to stall out the rest
for the rest of the match and win by default.
And they and they banned it from competitive play.
There's also the handcuff glitch. I'm trying to look up what game it's Street Fighter 2's handcuff glitch.
Oh, it was a guile thing, right? Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, you could just make things impossible to continue. Yeah, if the foe is stuck until the round timer runs out.
Oh, you're right. It's when it rotates the character model and sticks him onto his body. Yeah, I remember that. In like a hit stun, in their hit stun state. Yeah.
And there are other similar things where basically it would break the thing entirely, and if you get the like glitch or exploit, it would remove all skill entirely. So there's that. I think that is more analogous, and people do ban that because
it removes interaction,
removes any ambiguity of like, yeah, you just got that and you win.
Yeah,
okay,
it removes
like,
all gameplay.
even with like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 combos, like people can drop, and you know,
human error.
And also like you weren't necessarily like guaranteed to get into that situation where you got hit. And then you know things like TSC Infinites, I believe, get banned.
Anything that completely removes all interaction or basically halts all gameplay, all meaningful gameplay, is banned, right?
Yeah. So I think fighting gamers deserve a bit more credit there. In like that's pretty analogous to like the hook thing, right?
Yeah.
Where they banned the players had to do it rather than the devs, right? Because it was a game that didn't have like live service, you know.
In the case of like your old Street Fighter and Smash Brothers, before patches was a thing.
For a less dramatic case though, like not something that is a glitch or something that like ends the game outright. Dragon Ball Fighters, Android 21's buff debuff grab.
Yeah.
Nearly everybody hated that just because getting one invincible startup grab let you increase your own 21's power by 21% and decrease your opponent's character that you hit it with their power by 21%. And it was both easy to land as a reversal and at the end of combos. So it was too much value to not play 21, and then everyone is playing 21, and everybody hated it.
Because literally, once you land that on a character, that character has to do like one whole extra combo to get a KO.
I mean, 21% less damage means that a combo that, it means like if you're 2-touching, now you're 3-touching. That is huge.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So, but the problem is when you go into the opposite direction too far, and you make it so that things like when they tighten up the gameplay design so that such things and cheese can't happen, then people kind of get bored. Like Street Fighter 5 compared to Street Fighter 6 or 4, right? Because like you have, what was it, in 5 people said that it was like too easy to do the optimal stuff, right? Like everyone was doing the optimal stuff.
Strike throw
instead of
you know, all players of one character are going to play the same.
Yeah.
You know, everything devolves into strike throw.
And you still had standout players, like, for example, wasn't nobody playing playing Akuma like Tokido, right? And I think that honestly more closely mirrors like how things are in like MOBAs, for example, where they're not like finding ways to break limits, but like people like Tokido was just playing Akuma at the highest level that anyone had seen. And so that was in and of itself enough to make him a top contender consistently, right?
Well, I mean, when a game is so
like Faker and League of
narrow, when a game is so narrow like that, I believe that's the right term to describe Street Fighter 5, right? Because each character had less tools. You know, each character had like less ways to combo, right? And so there's kind of just a couple of optimal combos and things to do, right? So it's a narrow game, and when you're playing a narrow game, then what separates the best of the best is all of the tiny optimizations or your in the moment reactions and decision making. But yeah, the sameness though still made it so that a lot of players are just not going to enjoy it as much, because it's all going to turn into a blur, especially when you're playing it as much as they do in order to be the best.
Yeah, that's true, because the amount of grinding they do to get to that level means the repetition is going to feel even more so. More, what's the word I'm looking for? More, it's going to be more exacerbated, more apparent to them than it would for a casual player like you or me.
Meanwhile, just by the fact that there's like 8 players involved in a MOBA match, or like 10 players, you know, depending on if it's like 4v4, 5v5.
Yeah.
That's just going to make it so that there are so many more different variables. Like variations of things that can happen in a match, even if every player has less things they can do in a MOBA than things that an individual player can do in a fighting game. Even if like each game is generally going to go the same, you know, like even just thinking about like you know, the newer MOBA that we've been playing, Dragon Ball Project Multi. I still hope they get a real name.
Oh, they're going to. I just don't know what it could be.
Yeah, but like the same thing is kind of happening each game, right? You go down the route. You pick up your farm as you go to the middle.
The objective doesn't change, and therefore, when the objective doesn't change,
you engage with the opponent around the like nearly big farm enemy in the middle of your lane. You know, you get the opportunities to attack your opponent's point. The great ape comes out in the middle, and then you fight for that. Now there are different decisions to be made according to, like, partly according to what the enemy team is doing, and like what else is happening when the ape comes out and whatnot. But like the flow of the game is essentially the same each time. And especially because it's so structured, as opposed to like in a fighting game, the flow of the game is dictated by what happens in the game, right? There is no you do this until this, and then you do, and then an event comes in. No, you're on offense because you managed to get a hit, and then it evolves as you go according to what you do, right? But yeah, so everything about MOBAs should be more samey, but I think just the fact that there are way more players involved in the game just makes it so that, in the subconscious of like human psychology, right? There are so many more small differences in between games like games of a MOBA like Project Multi, where different matches are going to feel more different from each other than something like Street Fighter V is, where like you're fighting the same character for multiple players and they all feel the same. Like, that's gonna suck.
I agree. Yeah, like that makes perfect sense, and that's why I think like with what was it? I think maybe that's why games like Multiverses. Like, honestly, I think I've had an alone, even though I don't play it a whole lot, when we've played Multiverses together, it's always been fun. Regardless whether we win or lose, it's always been fun. And I think that comes from the fact that even though it's, the Smash style gameplay, right? It's definitely much simpler than a traditional fighting game. The fact that there's 4 people in play at all times keeps things so varied.
Yeah, more variety according to like positioning and what's happening, whereas playing 1v1 multiverses,
it can get repetitive, especially when there's certain characters that you see the most, right?
Well, also just because in a 1v1 match, there's going to be kind of one optimal way to approach, and people are just kind of going back and forth, jockeying, whatever, and then you get a hit, or like you attack, one person dodges, they counterattack, the first person dodges again, and it's ordered, and it gets kind of boring sometimes, or you just get mollywopped because you ran into a crap matchup. Yeah, I don't play Iron Giant anymore because I don't like being combo food.
Yeah. Yeah, the Giant, he's gonna be comboed all the time by most characters.
Giant is one of those characters where like he's like crap until he's too good because he happens to get like an infinite combo, and then that has to be patched out, and then he sucks again.
Yeah.
He is the grappler problem in Multiverses. He cannot be allowed to be good.
Yeah. So basically,
because then he's too good.
So what we're seeing kind of emerge here is that tighter gameplay in a player versus player environment works, especially when it's more than just 1v1, because then the more characters you add into the mix per round, the more, or per match, I guess you could say, the more variables there are without having to add too much complexity. It's depth, not complexity per se. Yeah, it's a little more complex, but not overly so. Not complexity for complexity's sake.
It's variables, because if you have a tight 1v1 fighting game, then you only have two people making decisions. And if the design is too tight, then you're generally going to be making the same decisions over and over again. Whereas just by nature of having more than two people involved in a game, there's going to be more variety because there are more people, more more uncertain variables in the equation, right?
Yeah,
it's
and also
like if you've watched any like shows or anime where like it's about like characters having different plots against each other, right? It gets more interesting or chaotic when there's more than two factions involved.
Well, I mean, wasn't that why because going back to like Fantasy Strike, that's why they made it so that the competitive standard is both players pick 3 characters each, because of the lack of variety and versatility within each individual character because of how tightly it was designed. That was the way they had to offset it becoming way too soft, right? Like, because queuing up 1v1 was very like, it was imbalanced. I just picked the rushdown character against the best zoner. The zoner's gonna win. Or it was just swingy, right? It was real swingy. It was either too swingy or it was too too predictable, right? Especially the bad matchups. And so they had to make it so that you had to win with all 3 characters, which forced more variety in each game. But
was it that you had to win with all 3 characters, had to win against all 3 of your opponent's characters?
I mean, if you win with all 3 of yours, you win against all 3 of the opponents.
No. That's not necessarily the same thing, because
I think it was win with all 3, because if I remember correctly,
you could roll around.
I remember when you won with a character, they would pull that character out of the rotation, so you had to win with all 3.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, that way you couldn't rely too heavily on one character to beat 2 of the opponent's characters.
Yeah.
You had to win with all 3, which was an interesting workaround conceptually. And I guess that was the best way to offset the tightness of the design, but I kind of end up falling off because of the lack of variety in each character, lack of not variety, versatility. So it went a little too far in the other direction. It's definitely an interesting discussion, because I feel like obviously we usually come back to like some form of balance, right, based on expectation, but the problem is that balance, it varies so wildly. It's not just smack dab in the middle, right? Because like we said with PvE, right, games, character action games, single player or co-op PvE games, you're okay to have more looseness in design. In fact, that's probably advisable, but you can't have it be so that the players can just do anything without any kind of structure.
I think balance in PvE is based on a completely different axis.
Yeah,
because it's more the fact that you need to try to make multiple different options comparable in efficacy to each other, to where it isn't just a blowout of like, well, this option is way better than everything else, so I'm not even going to bother to use anything else. Dominant strategy. There needs to be some reasons to use multiple different things in conjunction with each other. It's not a competitive balance. It's
efficacy balance,
encouraging the player to have variety,
and that's
in order to prevent them from becoming bored.
And that's the thing, a dominant strategy, or a predominant strategy, I guess, is the more extreme version of that. As in, it's dominant before you even, like...
I'm not sure that's what predominant means.
Okay, well, either way, the ultimate strategy, right? For there to be one centralized strategy that is dominant and there's no reason to do anything else. That is never ideal in anything, in any kind of game. It's just not, right? Like, the lack of variety is what kills longevity.
Yeah, but it's not as much like balancing, like, things can't be too strong because we don't have to care about the fun of someone else because you're just fighting NPCs. What matters is the balance of different options that the one player has, as opposed to balancing multiple players' options against each other. So like, if you gave someone like a sick, Buster Blade or whatever, and then you also have like a dagger that you can use. Well, that dagger better have something special, because otherwise,
that dagger better have a speed advantage, right? It better have a speed advantage.
Yeah.
That way, which one you pick depends on how you want to play.
Unless you're trying to design it to where, like, oh, you start out with the dagger and then you upgrade to something else, like that would be different. But if it's like an additional option, then it better be comparable in strength. It's like, like Monster Hunter makes the different weapon options comparable to each other, right? So that you can pick what feels good to play. And there are also some ways, like different monsters have resistance to different kinds of damage, so that encourages you to use multiple weapons, unless you just want to bulldoze your way through using like a hammer all the time, even against monsters that are resistant to like bludgeoning damage, right? But I mean, that's something you can also do, I guess. Yeah, if you want to use like if you want to use like a great sword against like zippy, agile enemies, then nobody's stopping you. But like, it's encouraging you to maybe not use the great sword all the time.
It's kind of funny too, because like in Monster Hunter Rise, the longsword was just so good, and then I believe it was the gun lance that was like bottom tier. Now obviously it's PvE, so it doesn't matter as much. If you like longsword, play longsword. If you like gun lance, play gun lance, right? Like whatever, play what you like. But okay, so funny though, because
I mean, so clearly there was some issue with balancing the different things against each other, but that also may have been an intentional choice, because they know, well, newbies are going to be more drawn toward the longsword because they dig katana, and
they give you one to get you started in the hub missions after you complete the village missions. They give you the chief, the elder, right? The village elder's longsword.
Hugin, and you
so
have more leeway, and you have more leeway to give players like a tool that is more powerful than some others. If that's like supposed to be a draw for the like less skilled player, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not infringing on any kind of competitive integrity. But yeah, there is some level of, you know, variety needs to be encouraged.
Yeah, and that's why in Monster Hunter, like you said, if you're using a blunt damage weapon and it's a monster that's got thick hide or thick armor that resists that, well, you're kind of encouraged to use something else, right?
Or like in a for example, like a Metroidvania game, you know, there's always different enemies that are like immune to certain things, so you have to use your other weapons, you know, to take them out, right?
Yeah, or like or you're forced to use all your abilities just to traverse the map, right?
Yeah, but if the game was like, oh, this beetle is weak to like ice, right? So freeze it and then shoot it. But just shooting it with the normal blaster takes it out faster.
Yeah.
Then no, they're just gonna players are just gonna blast it. What's the point? You know? So again, the bouncing of the different tools against each other and giving you a reason to use it. Like,
yep. And it's funny too, because like I do find it funny how you brought up Monster Hunter, because I would say that older Monster
everybody
Hunter...
knows that we're a Sonic and Monster Hunter and fighting games channel. That's
even though I never really play fighting games anymore, especially now on stream.
We're talking about the podcast.
Yeah,
that's all we kind of end up talking about.
Right. With Monster Hunter, I find it funny though, because like regarding looseness and tightness of design, I feel like the newer entries are actually a bit more on the loose end, as they feel less clunky than the old ones did. And a lot of the longtime fans, they actually liked the older entries for that more restricted, game feel. And feel like the new ones lean a little closer to action game, right? Which, as we said, looseness is a little more more pleasing to play, right? Like
well, in
Breaker 4 is better.
In the context of an action game, but like, people who are looking for immersion are always going to be looking for something tighter.
True, and in that way, realism is more dependent on restriction than loose, tighter design rather than looser design.
Yeah.
Right, because like you're not going to be drifting around a corner like you're in Initial D or like in a Need for Speed game if you're playing a simulator, right?
Yeah.
Sim. At least one that's trying to be realistic. Now maybe in something that's trying to be in the kind of the in-between, which is what I'm finding to be mostly fun, more fun a bit, is kind of that mid-ground range. But there is some enjoyment to the more realistic ones. Like I like using the steering wheel and the VR headset, right, for that immersion. And the fun there comes from, in my opinion, the skillful driving within those realistic constraints, right? But again, that's all about not pushing the limits of what's possible, but more like trying to reach, they call it driving on the edge, like going to that, pushing your car to its limit without going so far off the limit that you spin out, right? Because the tires have a limit in their grip and the engines have their limits, so like driving on the edge is like pushing it to its limit without going over, because going over the limit is actually a bad thing. So it is interesting how, like, but then at the same time I also see some people like in sim racing, right, in the sim racing scene, as I'm dipping my feet into those waters, see people being a bit like almost curmudgeonly, like overly strict on aspects that I don't think necessarily pertain to, like they want absolute, like we said in the last podcast, they want that absolute.
Yeah, we already had that whole conversation.
Yeah, because like there's the one that's like supposed to be more of a simulator type, but they're going for more esports. They're going for like competition. and for that you need to, it needs to be interesting to watch, right? And if it's just absolute realism, I feel like it's not going to be all that interesting to watch. Like me, I'm finding the most popular type of racing, GT3, to be kind of boring to watch. I find the faster, like F1 cars and Indy cars more interesting to watch. But because of how
ironically, this is a case where you completely flip or almost like more flip to the other side. It seems.
You know what I find interesting?
Wanting something looser than because, like, for instance, what's like one of the most tightly like ruled kinds of racing, right? NASCAR. That people make jokes all the time about, like,
driving in a circle,
turning left.
You're right. Even though
you just need to know how to drive straight and then turn left too.
Yeah, and it's not that easy. I actually tried a NASCAR in one of the simulators that I've been dipping my toes into, and man, is it hard to control those things. Even just on the straight, it's hard to control them.
Yeah, but still, if you compare it to like other tracks where have more like different turns,
more twists and
whatnot. Like, you're more on the end of something a bit looser, it seems, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's interesting because I'm finding, like, when it comes to actually driving in the simulators, the slightly slower cars I'm finding more interesting to drive than to watch. The ones with more cornering grip and stuff, and a little bit less speed, I'm actually finding more interesting as a driver. But as a spectator, I actually find the faster ones interesting. And in terms of tracks, I'm finding that the ones that force you to come to what feels like an almost complete stop, obviously you never want to completely stop in a race, right? You want to always be moving, but you want to try to optimize your corners as much as possible. But the ones that have you cut your speed so much in order to take these tight turns, I'm finding that they like that break in the flow. It's like as soon as I start hitting a flow, the flow is forcibly broken. And I find those less fun than the ones that have more loose turns and allow me to hit a good flow of, like, okay, I accelerate here, I ease up on the gas here, I hit the brakes a little bit, then I turn. If I don't have to, I don't know, I'm just finding it interesting, like, that the whole aspect of finding a flow, or like, it's weird. I'm still diving into it. I'm still formulating my opinions on it, because, like, now I'm trying out a little bit of rally racing. And that's a whole different beast, because that's more about, like, wrestling the dirt roads and stuff to keep control of your car, right? And so, because of the nature of, rather than riding a circuit over and over, the same circuit multiple laps, you're going over these dirt tracks that, if you are running laps on it, they shift and change every time cars pass over certain portions, right? That portion shifts and changes, the dirt does. So no two laps on the same rally cross circuit is going to be exactly the same. It's going to feel exactly the same. But most rally that I've been interacting with has been point A to point B. So you're not really memorizing a track. You're taking, every little bit of feedback and information in real time and focusing more on control, while slightly pushing your speed as much as you can without losing control. And it's a very interesting, like, it keeps you engaged on all fronts, right? Because you're like, every little bit of feedback is valuable information for how you need to control your car.
You know what I just realized?
It's interesting stuff.
For the people who aren't, like, into sim racers, for example, is a perfect Mario Kart example. Baby Park versus Mount Wario.
Yeah, and you know what? Interestingly enough, I actually enjoy Baby Park.
Really?
I do.
You enjoyed the 7 tiny laps of go right.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I actually enjoy it. And maybe it's because through those laps, I've already found, like, pretty much a really fast way to do it.
My favorite track was always Mount Wario.
Mount Wario is a pretty fun one, yeah, and that does have rally vibes, yeah.
Yeah, because you're just going, you drop out of the plane and you go
down the mountain.
Each of the 3 quote laps are actually just a different part of
Yeah,
going
just
down the
segments
mountain.
of the map. Like is Mount Wario? Is that that's the snow one, right?
Yeah, you're going.
Yeah,
going down
that's
a mountain.
That is a fun one.
I did say mountain.
Okay, well, but yeah, not all mountains have snow though. Through the whole thing,
you know.
But yes, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah,
It's
that
not
one
through the whole thing.
Yeah, that
You
one
know, you
is
start
really
at Snowy
fun.
Peak.
Yeah, that one is fun. That one is really fun. Point A to point B, you're taking each turn as they come in, and you know, memorization doesn't reward you as
you
much.
can memorize it like between different races of the track, but
Yeah, that's true. But also because it's Mario Kart, there's enough elements of random chaos to.
yeah. Well, also speaking of that, like items that are like laid down, you don't have like, oh, this banana was laid here last track. No, you've already passed it.
Last lap, yeah. Nope.
Yeah, last lap, yes.
True. So things that help you just push you forward faster, like the boost mushrooms, are more ideal in that track. And the ones that can hit people that are in front of you, like the shells. Makes sense.
You can hit people behind you too,
but if you miss or place a banana and it doesn't hit anyone, well then that's that. It won't catch anyone on the next lap. That makes sense. And you know, there is some fun to be found in both, like with circuit racing, where it's a tightly designed track, right? And so you're running the same laps over and over. There is some fun to be found in that, when in like finding a flow.
so many people don't like Baby Park though.
Yeah, I know. So I think a lot of people don't like it because of the chaos of it, though.
That too, yeah.
Whereas me, for whatever reason, I thrive on Baby Park by, well, it goes one of either ways. Either the chaos is too much and I can't hit my flow, or I get into the flow and I mitigate the chaos and like bend it to my advantage. Like if I get enough speed boost mushrooms on Baby Park, I'm gonna be one of the fastest guys there. Like outright, I'm pretty much winning it. Like I've gotten that good at it. and it's because of the, like, each lap I just get faster and faster. That pushing myself faster and faster element of it. Like you said, pushing the limits, except you're not breaking limits, you're just pushing the limits, right? And I think I think that's the kicker part of this whole discussion of looseness and tightness. I think looseness becomes an issue once those limits can be completely broken, because then that's when all the unintended stuff happens, and that's what can create a huge imbalance in the player's experiences, especially if you're the one going against the person who knows how to break the limits in the way that removes your interaction as much as possible. I think that's where the looseness becomes the issue, like because then it starts to, just like how too much restriction, right, too much tightness in the design can reduce, it boils down interactions too much to the point where decision making stops to be as much of a factor, right? Because once you know the optimal decision, there's no reason to do anything else, right? So I think looseness can be just as much of a liability when it gets to that point where you can break the limits of, the intended limitations of the game engine. But unfortunately, in some cases, like the heavily individualistic FGC, the people tend to favor the ones that let them break their limits, because that gives them more ability to, I guess, have that individualistic expression. Unfortunately, that often comes at the expense of the other player, and I just don't really see that as a good thing per se. In which case I actually would prefer some more tightness in the design, so that both players have an opportunity to do things,
Right.
So it's interesting. But then when it comes to like the single player games or the cooperative stuff, I think more looseness is actually more favorable, because like I said in the beginning with Gundam Breaker 4 compared to New Gundam Breaker, too much restriction makes it feel clunky and unappealing. More looseness and it makes it, that free formness of you and me figuring out the combos, how to combo together normal attacks and skills of the different kinds of weapons and parts you could equip, was where the fun came from. That's what made it so addictive, right? Was figuring out new ways to string together the different actions. Like, heck, I was playing on my handheld earlier today, and I had 2 really good combo strings, and I saved the clips, and I might upload those like either I don't think it would be this channel, but maybe I'll put them together in a video, or I'll just post them on Twitter or something. But yeah, like that's just
Twitter would actually be good.
Yeah, just the looseness of that design actually makes it better, you know. And it doesn't feel like there's no limits. Obviously, you're limited to only the skills of the parts you have equipped, and you can't just use the same skill over and over and over, for example. And so there's still structure, like you said, you need structure, but it is much more loose, and that just makes the game feel good to play. But we're doing that on the CPU, not against other players, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I always said, like, you know, PvP, the whole point is the player interaction, player versus player. If you want to do really big flashy combos on another player, you know, go play a character action game where the whole point is doing these kind of things and then being rewarded with it for it in the game's design itself. So
yeah, well, sometimes you also just want to swag on somebody. Yeah,
I mean, you can swag on somebody. For me though, the ultimate form of swagging on somebody is counterplay. Is they tried this thing and I perfectly countered it and dunked on them, you know. I'm just
saying, you know, sometimes you just want to get hyped. Do you think full combos? You know, in the words of Maximilian, dude. Trying to get full combos. Just go nuts. So get your, you know, like I'm not in, like, you know, I have a threshold obviously, but I do enjoy that element. Like, I enjoy that element, and I enjoy the element you're talking about as well.
Yeah. Oh, actually, it just popped into my head because you made me think of like the contrast of like the parts of fighting game experiences for me that stood out the most. Like that one time I was playing a Virtua Fighter streamer on his stream, going to the lobby in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, and it was a scenario where my back was pushed up to the wall because the game allows for ring outs to win rounds, and so I was pushed up to actually the edge of the platform, so I was in danger of getting ringed out even if I successfully blocked an attack. Like, he did an attack that would have ringed me out even if I blocked it. So I read that, and because of the tightness of the properties, the way they designed the game, like, you know, moves properties are binary. If a move is sidesteppable, it's sidesteppable every time. If you know, have right timing, you can sidestep it. It's not like, oh, I knew I sidestepped in the right direction, but I still got clipped, like in Tekken, right? There's none of that in Virtua Fighter because they run on the binary properties. This is steppable or this is not steppable. That's it. So that tightness of design means consistent rewards for proper counterplay, right? And that makes the counterplay more rewarding to me. And so I saw the move coming because I knew the situation I was in, and I just predicted what he was going to do. I sidestepped his attack, I slipped it, and then I knocked him off the ledge and got the round. And it was just so satisfying. It was a hype moment for me. For me, that's more hype than any long combo, honestly. And I think that was a result of, honestly, if the design was as loose as Tekken, I could have gotten clipped when I tried to step, and I would have lost still, even though I did the right move, right? Made the right action. So I think a measure of tightness also increases consistency of reward. And in a genres where risk reward is such a big factor, you kind of want consistency for that, right? You want something that's supposed to be risky to be risky, but you also want the reward for it to be consistently rewarding. If you can mitigate that risk or reduce the risk by breaking the game's limits, or the game engine's limits, you know, increase reward, reduce risk, well, then you're upending the balance. So it's definitely an interesting, like, nuanced discussion, because a big chunk of it does come down to preference too, what the players want. But I do think that on a more objective level, some genres should lean more towards one end of the spectrum than the other, just by nature of what those genres are and what the purpose of their existence is, right? The foundation of their existence.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's just it's funny because this whole thing just came from from playing the Gunna Breaker 4 playtest, and being able to compare my recent experience playing New Gundam Breaker and just how drastically different they were. And that was really what sparked the idea in my mind. So,
All right.
yep. I think we pretty much came to the end. Don't think there's much else either of us could really say about it. It's not really a topic that has like a conclusive, like, this should be this way. I just think some genres, like things that are fundamentally player versus player, are built on a foundation of player interaction, so they should probably lean a little more towards type design to facilitate that. And then things that are more player versus environment should lean more towards looseness to facilitate more, less of a clunky feel, right? And I think that's the only real conclusive statement that can be made about this. To what extent you go in those directions, that's entirely dependent on target audience and preference and other specificities. So, yeah. So, yep. So let us know what you thought. If you are watching this on YouTube, then let us know in the comments and subscribe to the channel because we do this monthly. I know this one will be coming out early September, but this is technically the August episode. It just so happened that the last weekend of August overlaps with the 1st of September. So our next one, we'll probably stream it. We usually stream it unless there's any kind of extenuating circumstances that cause a change of plans. But regardless of whether or not we stream it live, we do release an edited version on I release it on my channel, s_factor_sam, and then I release it on podcast platforms as well in audio only form. So make sure you follow those channels, keep up with our ongoing episodes, or maybe even listen to our past episodes. There's quite a bit of content just in this podcast alone. And then I create other variety content, from videos and shorts to live streams, mostly gaming focused. And then Sai here, he has his own channel on YouTube.
Yep. I've been streaming, but also this is the first episode of the podcast that we've done after I upload a video, and I'm working on more to be uploaded in the future. So I do streams, various games, some old, some new. Recently uploaded a reaction to the Sonic 3 movie trailer.
Yeah,
that's fun. Looking forward to that. Did a little bit of like a first go through, and then looking back at it a bit closer.
Yeah,
and
you
some
did more of an
addendums from the post. The editing process. So yeah, and I'm working on some other things as well. Maybe some like more like video essay-ish type stuff. Reactions aren't going to be anywhere near the bread and butter of the channel, but I'll definitely react to like Sonic stuff and stuff like that. But yeah, so
maybe start recording some game trailer reactions for games you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean,
but aside from that,
I'll have to work on being more aware of those things.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But yeah, and then size.
The channel is Sai Prime.
That's what I was like. Something's missing.
Yeah, I almost forgot to say because I go by Professor Prime these days now. But yeah, it's Sai Prime. SAI, the word Prime. Like Optimus. Yeah, so check it out.
Yep.
On YouTube.
Sai also frequently appears on my streams, but he's also started streaming himself. Far you've played games like
I've played Sonic Adventure 2. I've played the network test for Gundam Breaker
4.
4, the newest one. I've played Dragon Ball, Kakarot,
Project Multi.
Have
you streamed that one?
Lapidary. Yeah. You were in the chat.
Oh yeah, I was in the chat. That's right.
You called me a weeb.
That's right. I forgot about that because you pulled out certain phrases. I'm like, okay.
I was playing Zamasu. I was getting in a character.
Yeah. And yeah, so a variety of stuff there, right? You got some MOBA, some action RPG with Jarmo Kakarot. The occasional like little novelty games that every once in a while, one-offs like Lapidary or way back in the past. You're like interesting like puzzle games, like you particularly like those first-person puzzle games.
Yeah, there's some games I'm thinking of. I just need to get to it. You know, recording, let's play basically of it.
So
I'm trying to get everything set up because my worst nightmare would be to like do it and then do the whole thing and then I messed something up in the setup for the recording, so now like the first playthrough is spoiled and I can't do it again.
I've been there, like with recordings where the audio was just jacked and barely salvageable or not salvageable at all. That's the worst. So
because
it happens, but
but I'm working on stuff.
Yep. So yeah, Sai's got stuff to actually to actually plug now. So
I want to do like that. Let's plays, media analysis. Maybe dip my toe into like art content while I'm working on learning more how to do art as like especially in digital, but that's a hard maybe. Don't hold me to that one.
That's an oxymoron. A hard maybe.
It's a hard maybe.
Maybe is the okay.
Don't worry about it.
Anyway. So yeah. Okay. Well, that's it for us. This has been. I don't remember the name of this number of this episode.
It's on the screen.
Oh dang! You're right. Season 3, episode 6. I'm getting tired, man. I'm getting tired, man.
Oh no.
Season 3, episode 6. Yeah. So stay tuned for episode 7 not next month, at the end of September. Alrighty. We can do outros. We don't have any canned outros, so we're just gonna say bye, have a great one, and we hope to see you next time.
Yeah, hey, chillin'.
Peace.